everything's a relationship, right? So some relationship that you put everything into and really thought was going to pan out into something else. It could even be a business deal, an investment, and then wham, 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 it fizzes out. And so that is not cool. And there's a big part of what you learn, even in the entrepreneurship, to what causes that. First of all, that super excitedness that you're going to win the lottery, where there's really, the odds, the lottery has odds. So what are the odds this deal is going to go through? So there's so many things that you learn that was really immature about the way you were thinking about it that led to these bad decisions. However, when they present themselves again, does this rinse, rewind, and repeat? So I get excited when I get information like what we got on Sunday about our own cosmos in a box, just in seed form, because I can think about, I feel everything is plagiarized, especially when we're dealing with the industry. And so I know how like everything about Apple is like the wrapping, right? And then how this whole idea of when you get like a DIY kit, you have to actually learn about what you're doing. And it's really for connoisseurs, because they're the ones that really want to learn about what it is that they're using versus just want to have it, right? So in that respect, I could see us getting this box of 7 seeds, if you may, or 6 seeds in this case, since the 7th is a synthesis, but these seeds not being grown, and it being our responsibility to actually do the proper processes of rearing this seed set so that finally it could get to the next stage. This, of course, is the next stage in its awareness, which would be like a plant, then a bush, then a tree. And finally looking forward to that stage where these seeds can actually keep producing for you. So that way you can rest, which doesn't mean to go to sleep, but actually means to be cool, fulfilled. Like, you know what, everything is straight. All my children are grown up now and they're all doing good and they're all producing something for me. So that's what we're looking for, because that's sovereignty, right? But it's interesting how we're put into this, because it's not like we could just ask that and get that from somewhere else. We have a good model of an entire group of people who think that they're going to get that from somewhere else, like somebody else is going to do that for them, and they're watching that fall apart, and it's a nightmare. The whole thing for them, as far as those who practice these dark arts of alchemy and imbalances of alchemy, it's not pleasant right now. Okay, so speaking of the now, it's also full moon. Okay, and I found this interesting because we smack dab on a Monday, so that means that our clocks are set at this point, meaning that for us and how we're embarking on this journey, every single thing is lining up for us, because I had to query the moon to get the rest of the continuation of today's presentation in relation to the celestial body. And what better of time to do that than on the full moon, right? And so the first thing that came through in the transmission is about putting on these lenses. So remember yesterday I said that we should probably go into just one celestial body, spend the week there, and then move on. That way I could at least have time to do some research. And it wanted to elaborate on that further. It said, those are actually lenses. So you can, if you can imagine, the cogs in the clock are also synonymous with lenses, 2x, 3x, 5x, right? And each of these lenses go different distances, just like a different cog spins the whole wheel at a different ratio. Okay, so they're the same thing. And they so explain, so what you're to do is you're just to look through every single day this week through the lens of the lunar body. You're going to use that lens. And so it's like the world according, or the cosmos according to the moon. And I found that to be hilarious, because that's just kind of how the Bible is written, right? It's like the gospel according to John. And we know John is Oannes. Oannes is, connected to a planetary system and itself, actually connected to Saturn, right? So the reality here is that all of these connections are showing us that, oh yeah, there's a real story actually playing out here. And there's a real level of connection happening. And it just takes for us to read the code in order to actually get into it. So the next thing that needed to be actually transmission to everyone, because there can be some misconceptions. Remember, we're dealing with such encrypted knowledge. You need to look at the parable of the sower and look at the first thing that Yeshua says when he explains what happens to people as seeds. Okay, so now let's get rid of Jesus, because Jesus is with a J, and there's no J in these languages. So even to say Jesus is actually to evoke another being. That was like 101, the resistance. So then I threw the whole thing out, baby and bathwater. Who gives a shit? Let's keep moving on, right? And I went into deeper things. However, now full circuit, I got to revisit this again. Who are we talking about? Yeshua. Okay. Now, Yeshua's got a pretty long story, and it pretty much exists in every single culture. They have one, and it's just the act of a seed getting all the way to full life so early that it starts to become disruption for a lot of the things that have been preying on the field, why the seeds have been in this generation period. Okay, so is that very clear? So it's somebody who reaches the crystal stage. That means actually goes to a full activation. And then they're still in the stage of being on the planet. That is the Yeshua story. Okay. Now, in this story, and I just wanted to clarify that because somebody may say, well, why are you going back to biblical parables? Because these parables actually come from a deeper culture. And this particular person who was walking through actually is one of the things that are walking through our consciousness. It is us in every tense. So we just look at the knowledge and it talks about the parable of the sower, and the first seed, as they talk about, it falls down amongst the sides of the, like, let's say just some seeds just fell right here. Okay, now this is not soil. This is not going to grow anything. So something's going to come by and actually eat that seed. And it says, in this case, the birds came and they ate that seed. And when even it's explained deeper, because that's known, when you say a bird is going to come down and eat a seed, that is basically like what we would see these days as a dark angel. Okay, the bards, there's the darker forms of the bards. The bards are the birds, the ones who spoke the bird language. Okay, this is the antiquity stuff. That's why they draw the angels with wings. Okay, so, and even the Vikings have wings and all of that. And the Valkyries, these are the birds of prey. Okay, so not every bird that you see, Wonga Tonka, and that they're just coming and bring you. Birds are serious predators, apex predators. Okay, so this is a reference to that. Those seeds that never get actually in the ground, the birds come and get them right away. Okay, now this is also a reference to knowledge, and this is what I'm bringing up here. It's a reference to how fast wisdom can stay in your mind that you really need to be actually listening to. Because what is brought forth in this scripture is it's literally saying that. So when wisdom sets on you some deep stuff that can change your life, if it doesn't fall in the area of fertilization inside of your consciousness, there is another form that just comes in. Let me get that out of here, because that could just totally blow my whole plan if he decides to actually get himself, or she decides to get herself into this course of light. That would be ridiculous right now. So I'm taking that idea. Now, if you can really think about it, maybe you can. How many ideas have you actually lost? I can for sure say that I forgot more than most people thought of at this stage. I have these brilliant ideas and they never make it from the shower to a pen and paper. Like, it's just like, even sometimes when I even get there, it's either like, you know what, you'll remember it. That's my main one. Man, you're going to remember that. You'll never forget that one. Think about how golden that one is. Like, I've summarized the meaning of life within 4 words and then started getting down there to write it down. And it was 9 words after that. And I was like, no, it was 4. I know I can get this on Instagram and hit that word limit. But serious, it's this process that we have this intelligence moving through constantly, powerful seeds, because we're always producing them, and then they're just getting ate up. So it wanted me to go through this process, and I'm just referring to it as something else because it's easier to ping off higher self when you do that, rather than just, where are you going if it's just right there. So I like to get this conversation going on like a CV. Like, are you hearing me? Over. Because now I'm not sitting there going to be talking again. Are you over there? If I don't get an answer back, I'm done. I'm moving on to something else. But if something's going to transmit back, I'm like, yeah, I'm here. What's up? Did you know it was full moon today? It's like, nah, I didn't know. Siri, what's the moon cycle today? It's full moon. Thanks. You're finally good for one damn thing, Siri. So anyway, okay. So the next thing is, so what do you want me to know? So first of all, why are you calling me the elder? And I said, well, I just know to. And it said, well, let me explain why. I've been here for the whole thing. And that's all you need to be aware of. I'm an elder because the moon has been in the sky before your parents, before your parents' parents, before a lot of stuff that you can even think about. I was there. So this is what makes my lens very powerful for you to see through. Now, remember last week when we were going through that process where we were in the meditation and Buddha, Hermes, through the wisdom, decided to make this eye for the gods to see through to the other gods. Okay. Now, who would have known we should have just continued to take all of this internally, because that's what we're being explained now, is how to use the lens or an eye of another celestial body to see things how they see it. And this would not only give you the bird's eye view, and we'll get a little bit later on in the week of what that means, because In the ancient tradition, they say they have agreeables and disagreeables. This means that some of the birds is on the level, they're doing their thing, they're in their highest light, and those are like these bright birds, like the macaws and all that. And then they got these other birds that, just like the humans, they haven't got it yet, and they're just still in that one shade of color, like let's say the blackbirds, the doves, or the crows, just one shade of color. And it's like, oh, I'm so and then the crow is like, ah, ah. But what about the macaw? Where does the macaw sit in all that? Like in the jungle, still having fun, made it up, doing different things. So this is how every single animal genus has been so proficiently explained, that everything exists within everything. That means that everything that we are exists in the variations of everything, though, because everything has been divided already. So it's not just that one beetle. It's like you got to bring the entire beetle family. And in the beetle family, you'll see the entire creation. But if you just go to one beetle, you're going to see that part of the spectrum. You're going to have to dissect and go deeper in order to actually see where it all meets back to the whole. And who has the lens to peer into when you go deeper and to understand what you're seeing? Right? Because let's say, for instance, you can grab a microscope and you can go deeper, but do you really still know what you're looking at? Life. You know what I mean? Of course, that'd be like the life. It's like, okay, yeah, life, but sit down. There's more going on here. There's phases of mitosis. There's bacteria moving around. There's certain kinds of bacteria, good ones, bad ones. So there's a lot actually going on in there that you need to use the lens, not just to see it, but also to interpret it. And this is the clip of the third eye. This means that in this age where everybody's being promoted to use the third eye, most people inhabiting a third eye experience have no clue what the cornucopic Joker thing jumping around in front of their face is. That's like trying to hump you with light. And you're like, oh my goodness, unless you either relax and realize that you're still in your root chakra, which is the Joker, and that whole aspect of where you're at upside down is why you're, that whole clown, like the ground is moving. That's first chakra upside down stuff. And if you had read all the symbolism and had become at least an initiate before going on that journey, you would have known that. But that's not how life keeps rolling itself out. It wants to keep smacking you every time you grab the key, run off with the car, and nobody told you. Now you know you're in trouble when you start driving back up the street almost out of gas, right? If anybody's ever took your parents' car when you're younger, you always try to bring it back. It's got no. That's how they normally tell, because the gas is off, and they're like, "Who's been driving my car?" And so the reality is that this is the power that we get a chance to now enjoy in our existence, that the elder, which is this lunar body, which we have to get into deeper, has some deep stuff that it wants to show us, as it talked about on the weekend. But there is also something specifically for today. And that is, wisdom must prevail, that when you get to a certain stage, we need to see a result of why we can tell that you're at that certain stage. And the main thing with that result is, will you be profiting when future things happen? Or will you be scrambling like everything else, trying to figure out what it's going to do? Because you didn't read the signs and read the stars and read yourself. So what we see intuitively happening here, because I even got a quick article, because I was looking at rooters really briefly. I got the whole thing with the full moon. I got the transition from yesterday. So I got everything to connect into this, what I'm about to explain. And it's that we need to be aware about next year's middle season, when the harvest is due. Because why they've been peppering it through the news, they've been very blatant at explaining that all of the Midwest, and this is for the United States, I guess people will have to look in your country specifically. But for the United States right now, they've pretty much lost most of their crop. And right now, they can't plant because there's too much water, which is another anomaly. Farmer on the news saying his father never missed a day. We never had to miss a day because of rain. Now we're missing an entire season. And this billions of dollars that have been allotted for farmers to actually receive to relieve them from all what happened with the tornadoes and tearing up that entire area where there's no crop, that can only go to people who have actually successfully planted a crop. So this means that all those farmers are getting bad news. Now, unfortunately, most of those farmers are actually, one, been proficiently making food that is harming other people, taking all the GMO seeds. That is just something that they're doing. Nice people. That's just nice people. At least they're feeding us, yes, but that's how all this works. You must come into balance with all the weights and measures. But there's another thing that's been happening. And these are still the great, 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 great grandkids of basically slavers. So at a certain point, nothing leaves, nothing escapes. We either have to balance this out or reap what we sow. Okay, so there's a reaping going to happen in the United States with its food supply, and that's very clear. And I would think that the most valuable thing next year will obviously be seeds, will obviously be food. You see what I mean? So it's about an action also that we also need to take personally. Like even on this land that I'm on, there's about, I would say 10, 12 trees that are proficiently producing fruit year round, right? And then, like I said, you could adjust your diet. You can go, if it gets worse, you can go out there and hunt tepesquintle or something that, maybe is going to gratify. There's a fucking ocean out here. If you starve in front of an ocean, you should die. Because you probably had to transmute one of your fish friends to survive for the night. So the reality is that there is no scarcity here. There's only ignorance. So what I'm saying is you don't have to be scared that, oh my goodness, is everything going to run out of the food supply? We're going to go into a zombie apocalypse. It's not about that. What it's about is just your overall awareness as a seer, literally having the ability to see from the sky to know what the weather and seasons and things are going to change, because also something needs to happen there. Something needs to be cleaned out. Something needs to be restored, especially in the US. It has to go on its Sabbath. And that's what I'm saying. The Sabbath is the reaper within itself, right? So if we know that those times are coming, if I don't want to enjoy that or do that myself, why would I even be around? Why would I even be in that stage? And this is something that I feel that is very powerful for us, is the fire, the agony. When I know some stuff's got to be done and I got to get to a certain point at a certain time, watch how I work. But when I know that, it's pretty much up to me how long it's going to take, watch how that being works. Two totally different things, right? You've witnessed this within yourself. Like when it's time to get something done, rent's due next week, you just lost a job, man, do you perform? We see your best then. But then once everything smooth back in and lines itself out and you say, see, I'm blessed, I got my, they look out for me. And right when I lost that other good job, the other one was there for me, knowing, darn well it didn't play out that way. You was like in this sheer terror before the whole thing happens. But what I'm saying is that let us be always in a stage of happiness by preparing for what will be the obvious, which would also push us into making moves that we should have made a long time ago. Let us now realize again that these seeds and this food is really the only real currency, because that, and many tenses, because that's what you need, that other people actually have. See, breath, somebody can't hold on to that. Now, how I also cracked into all this was I was in the shower. And again, this is just working with strict gnosis. And I'm like, so celestial body elder, what is your part of the body? And it said, great, ask yourself that question. So I started going through the different parts of the body. Is the moon this? Is the moon that? And it's funny because it's like a child again, because you start kind of like querying yourself. Well, what does it correspond to? It corresponds to the waves. It corresponds to abundance. And I was like, the mind. It's like, no, because if you take the mind now, what about Hermes? Because surely Hermes got the dual brain, mental balance, corporate council. It's like, yeah, you're right. I got to find another part of the body. All right, let me go. Can it be the screen, complete, clean, sling, kidneys? No. It's like, okay, done. No more wrong answers. The gut. Because the gut controls the mind, but is not the mind. Like somebody had posted something inside the chat about how everything in the gut is affecting what you're thinking, right? And this is for sure, because when my stomach is growling in the morning from, whatever the overproductions or whatever happens with the alkaline or whatever, which I had to work on a strong balance for that, my attitude is shitty. And it's not even something that I can actually I just am upset. And that's because the gut is controlling the mind. Also, when you're feeling like content, maybe after you've drunk a few nasty green drinks and some algae and all that, and you've gotten 2 hours later, where you forgot you even drunk that stuff. After a while, you got happy and you like it, everything, and then you realize it's because everything is calm. All right. Okay, so are we still transmitting, everyone? Is that still working? Okay, great. All right, so the gut controls the mind. But the reason why it was also explaining, the moon was explaining why it is the gut, is because it also is responsible for processing everything. It's also responsible. It's basically responsible for the regulations. And this is once again bringing us to that term, the Lord, like who's regulating the land. And so this is also deeper into are crops, right? Because we know that the moon cycles actually control the planting of the seeds and when the seeds are going to go on to full bloom, etc. So it all ties in then. I say no more about it. It's just the awareness that once you're tapping into this essence inside of yourself, because it's actually in your gut, then you would have a gut feeling. And that's why it's important for us all to be tied into each other as far as tribe is concerned and connected. Because if somebody's not getting that feeling, then that means that we need to transmit more down that line. What is your gut telling you? Okay. And then when you know what your gut is telling you, that says that you're actually directly connected. You got the moon gut connection pipeline completely clean. Now, remember, your gut can tell you the wrong things. Some people think that just the term, what is your gut telling you, refers to that it's always something you should be doing. That's not what we said. Because if it's dirty, the gut is going to tell you, go get more bad food. And we know that's because the worms send the signal to your brain because they want to populate. And so we know the whole process, even lenses and lenses in, but let's just take it on the surface. When the gut is not in good condition, it's actually telling you bad things to do. And then you take that advice and then you go and start reaping the results of this bad advice. Now, this is like being under a bad president, symbolically, doing what these dark nation leaders are saying to actually do. And then seeing the result of when you do that, what actually happens. If you let your kid just watch TV like they suggest, put the kid in front of TV, you go to work, blah, blah, blah. You see what I mean? So what is the result of that? So with yourself, you clean out your pipeline. That's why this is the gut. You can work on cleansing the gut. This is a big part of these automations that we have coming first. Our first step is to walk literally the ladder of lights, get into the gut and start listing every single way that we can do better for this. And then that way the person can do like a buffet and pick the things that they can do enough of to actually bring health. So it's like once you have a massive awareness of every single thing that is actually getting that planet all balanced, you can find so many different things that you're willing to do to put it back into balance that it becomes enough. And even also, since you now have the awareness, because as I say, the lack of wisdom, you shall perish. There's certain things that you're doing that you could care less if you're doing that or not, but you just kind of do it because it's there. And if you knew, well, no, when you mix that with that, this makes something totally different. Like for instance, after you eat a meal, you never drink a fruit drink, never drink anything beside even water. Okay? Because once your body is processing a meal and it gets a juice, everything stops and gets all confused because juice is totally different than generally what you're eating in a meal. So the worst thing basically a person can do is drink soda or a fruit drink or anything behind their meal, guaranteed. Because then what happens is you end up with some lumps because that's literally how the body just locks up with that. So now that you know that, it'd be like you'll even wait to have the juice or you'll have it 20 minutes or 30 minutes before the meal. So it's just simple wisdom. It's not like you got to get rid of the juice. It's just you never put them together. Same thing with melons. Eat them alone or leave them alone. Meaning that you never combine a watermelon or any other kind of melon with any other kind of food. It immediately congeals. Watch what it does. And even in a beaker, melons are used in cases like Jell-O and things like that for that reason. So the reality is now that you know that, then you'll just enjoy the watermelon, but you won't put all sorts of other things like chips and all these different things with it. So this is what we're talking about is if we have just a comprehensive list of just things that this is what you need to do to regulate the gut, it becomes easy for us to lock that in because that's a part of us anyway. The gut is in most interest of itself. It wants to see itself in its highest state, right? So we want to clear the pipeline and then the pipeline to us from the moon. Like if you felt like you had very troubled dreams are all crazy, pipeline is not completely clear. And this is how you can kind of test yourself because you have to have some kind of test and check and balance system to determine if you're making real progress inside of your consciousness. So what that is about is if you're actually going and pinging up to your lunar body and everything is clear and your gut is telling you, hey, watch how food becomes the most valuable thing. What? You serious? Yeah. People think it's going to go to gold next, but it's not. It's going to go to seed next. Seeds are going to be the most valuable thing. Not only that whole thing is going to trend with just having good food and good crops, and everybody's going to be in possession of bad seeds. Once these farmers flatten out and then they can't regenerate themselves because they're already in debt, because the system they inherited was actually a debt-based system because they still owe, and that nobody is going to get away. So you need to be looking at your own stuff and making sure that you're cleaning up with your father and your mother and you can do that because you got quantum solutions now. With every single thing that you face, you will have a counterbalance for that, but you must come into awareness. So meaning that if my father's done, I feel like that there's something that happened in the genetic experimentations inside of Kemet that had so much blowback for this racial group of people. They are now the bottom of things. And how do you start from the top and end up at the bottom and not go the complete cycle? There's this game that's called Age of Empires or something like that. It's on the Apple Store. It's like one of the most popular role-playing games. And on the first picture, they show all the nations of the world in that first picture. The Black nation is completely missing, meaning the African nation is completely missing, as if they contributed nothing to the growth of society. So what I'm saying is that but why did that happen? Like, I don't want to be the Dame in the Woods routine, like whining about something that used to be mine that somehow is not anymore. What happened? And you dig deep and deeper and deeper, and this shit gets so deep, I'll just reveal it one time because it's all about the lunar body. They say that there was this double-brained scientist known as Yakub during the end of Atlantis, meaning that the world had already reached the high stage that we keep feeling intuitively that it had, but we don't have really any signs of that except for the new modern technology. But if you look at all the ancient temples that are broken down and you understand what the purpose of those temples are, even the pyramid is enough. But when you go to Angkor Wat and you see the cymatics on the ceilings of certain vimanas, and so something was already very advanced that is now like petrified in stone. Okay. So when we rewind back to those times, we realize that what we're calling today the genetic modification, which is just really the reproductions and the populations of creating new races, was all taking place then. And this is why we can see in both of these cultures, these continuous pictures of half human body, half animals of all different kind of assortments. And this is said to be because our ancestors were like genetic engineers themselves. However, towards the end, because this worked for a while, and this is also talked about in the serious or the Nomo tradition, right? Where that the Nomo, which are like fish-like beings, are already in this scenario where the beings that came forth from them are starting to split. The Nomo themselves being androgynous, fish, amphibian kind of beings, but their offspring start to actually have a male and a female, and they start becoming concerned about these seeds because they know if this split keeps happening, it's eventually going to continuously weaken their essence. And since they're the creators of the whole thing, this is Series A, B, and C, that they have been trying to work with this planetary system. So that is the New Age story and the Old Age story. But it's just to bring light to very clearly that the genetic modification thing, it has this thing always with farming tied into it, where there's a literal act of the elders to try to get a better reproduction. Now, we can see that also in just the aspect of, again, arranged marriage, where you try to pair one being that is of the clear genetics with another being that is clear genetics and produce a baby that is clear genetics. That's all farming. Let's not think just about children and humans and what they would do with that selectively. When we can get any life form that doesn't have a say-so in the whole matter, we force them to do that. Do you understand what I'm saying? So a farmer is going to never mate the runts of the litter with the runts of the litter to create another runt. Why? Because the farmer then is going to have a runt in the next cycle, and all this is going to eventually mean the family is not going to have any profit anymore. The whole farm is going to fall apart. So do you understand? This is not a part of selective racism, whether I love this creature or not. If I actually loved it, I would make sure that I keep bringing it forward in its highest essence. I wouldn't try to dilute it with something that is going to bring it into a lower essence. Are we clear? A little nod of the head. I have 4 of you on the screen, actually. So if you nod your head, it helps me say, are you getting this? Because I don't want to go too far into this and you not understand where this all goes and how it connects to you. So what happens is that now, so you're going to, for yourself, always keep producing the best if it's under your control. Okay. When it's out of your control, who knows what will be produced? And they say that the end of Atlantis was like that. That this chief scientist, also known as the double brain Yakub, on the island of Patmos, which makes out today as Patagonia, took the Niger chimpanzee monkey to create a master race, meaning that in this whole fallout, because everything was already falling apart anyway, and there was a need for some kind of being to be created in the system that could kind of shape up all of the beings again. And because the chimpanzee, also known as, even this book that I was reading with David Icke, that it's called the Sarah. I'm gonna get the book right now, but anyway, a word that you actually think means snake in our etymology refers directly to a chimpanzee and the moon and monkeys. So actually what you're seeing here, because they're just like, I'm just trying to tell you what is going on, I'm just trying to tell you what's happening, put the two and two together for you. The genetics of a reptilian being and the genetics of a simian being was put together in order to create a new being. And this new being, it got out of control. And that's what it says in these texts, which can't really be found anywhere except for the ancient Moorish annuals, that the double brain Yakub, as a scientist, didn't have any control over the facility anyway, had several warring factions inside the facility when creating this particular being. And once creating it, this being proficiently began to take over everything and populate. And this was the destruction of everything, the fall of Atlantis. And then eventually that this race swept over the whole land like a horde and disturbed everything and pillaged and killed and all this kind of stuff. And then now here we are. So we see again, old Ouroboros, the snake eats its tail. The same thing that you can create can become your destruction. And how do we know that story is true? Because when we create badass kids, they become the end of us. Do they not? It's like when you create a bad child, when you didn't do everything that you needed to do to actually get that child cosmically imbalanced, because that child is a seed, what does that child become? If you let the child do whatever it wants to do, you see what I mean? Give it every single thing that it asks for, and you set no rulership there. You set no boundaries there. You set no Lord there. What is eventually going to become of that seed that you planted? So this is what we're looking at in the world. That's why the first act in this text, that the biblical text, is the making of a baby, right? That Adam and Eve come together, whatever the story says, and they produce Cain. And Cain is a killer right off. So it's just a metaphor saying, hey, listen, these things that you're creating, if you really want to go deep with this, make sure you're making these things so that understand your power. And this is why they try to like throw the whole snake motif in there, because the snake is an S. It means that it's going to pluralize things. So they say, okay, the snake comes in there and just whispers, hey, you're going to be like God if you eat from that tree. This tree is obviously an aphrodisiac that's being referred to, a strong, powerful one. They're in the garden of God. So this means that in the garden of God, now you're a God, and if you had your own garden, what kind of trees would you have there? All the best trees from the cosmos, right? So if you had your own garden and you were a God, you would have all the trees from the cosmos in this, all the best trees. So if you put yourself into this story and you find yourself wandering around this garden, you're like the new invention. You're like the new toy. And all around you, though, and that's why you're even allowed in the garden, all around you is all these other beings and other things that you don't even know anything about, because something else was storing all these seeds here. You're calling it Earth. Something is storing all of this stuff here, and now you're also here walking around. Like, you don't know nothing about this stuff. And there are plants here that when you eat them, you will know. You will know a lot more than you knew before you ate that plant, right? So now, though, one plant, though, is like an aphrodisiac plant. And it's kind of said that, hey, don't kind of eat that plant, because once you eat that plant, just don't eat that plant. That's the tree of life. Okay? That makes perfect sense. This thing makes you want to produce life. So do not eat this, because you need to know more about this. So obviously, again, so look at, paint the whole scene here. This is the place that not only does this quote unquote God have access to, So does this quote unquote serpent. Okay? Because the people have to realize that, well, the serpent was in the garden. Well, how did the serpent get in there anyway, unless it could also go to this garden? And that maybe it wasn't God's garden anyway, that all the gods could go into this garden. So this serpent god comes to these new beings that are like new toys in this garden with all these trees and says, so what's good? What's happening? Did he tell you the truth about the whole thing? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I guess somebody said something. I'm not sure if we're clear or not. So, did he tell you the truth about the whole thing? Hopefully, is everything clear? Are we breaking up or we good? Okay, great. So, did he tell you the truth about the whole thing? The truth about what? Oh, the truth about this tree of life, that when you start eating it, you'll be like the gods. You'll kind of know good from evil. See, not saying that the reason why you're going to learn good from evil is because what's going to happen after you eat this tree. Okay. Now, this is why look what I'm saying here. This is the deepest stuff. Now, animals don't mind being naked. Okay. Animals don't mind being naked. In the ancient pictures, also, when they show these ancient beings and they show the humans are running around naked. So when you go into the Sumerian text and you think you look up what was really happening, what you see is that after the experiment of creating the human bodies, the humans were so pure. They were like animals in a certain sense. They were like innocent animals. They didn't see that you should wear clothes or any of this kind of stuff. Even though the genetic scientists, they was wearing all this stuff and armor and crystals and all this kind of stuff because they're at the end of their age. And then what happens is through this advice, of course, of this apple, which is the pentagram, the snake's now there, that Eve, which is the woman or night, the womb, takes on and eats first and then immediately refers it to man. So this means that she ate something that made her like, hey, I know what to do now. And then they had a relationship. They had relations right there. And how you know that is, and this is just taking the crystal metaphor of what it's saying is, right after that, they knew. But what did they know? And so the story accounts that then the god comes back to the garden and they start hiding, just like you would do if you just had sex or something and your parents come home. It's like, oh shit, hide, right? And then this conversation next goes that, what's wrong with you guys? And then one's like trying to cover itself. You see what I mean? And this happens also in the Epic of Gilgamesh when they basically turn him on to a girl. After that, the animals don't even want to be around Gilgamesh anymore. And Gilgamesh goes into this mature stage. So what it's saying is that once you start producing seeds, you now will learn good and evil like the gods know. And you've also tapped into something. That's why I say, oh no, the tree of life will give you immortality. It does. But are you immortally happy? Or are you immortally sad? Now you see why we invented death? Because a lot of people, they just couldn't figure this out. They couldn't figure out why are we continuously going life after lifetime into darker and darker days, into samsara. Who can turn this around? Who has the knowledge and the wisdom to put all of these broken temples back together again? So that's what this is about. That's what these deeper insights are about, is they're about to disclose what happened, because you can ping something, a part of yourself that was here when it happened. Do you see how that works? That's how time travel works. You only need to ping something that has been here for, let's say the moon hasn't been here forever. There are older constellations, probably the elder gods, but we don't really know about them at this point. What is knowing? To be able to figure them out, to be able to tap into their minds and to realize what they're saying. Why would we want to do that if we don't have the first level of the curriculum? You see what I mean? So if you don't speak gut, you definitely are going to have a hard time speaking Mars and then Venus and then speaking. And as that keeps going out further, and then finally when it gets serious. But if you start doing this properly, because all the stuff is in the stars, all you got to do is measure from the pole star what's going to be next. So this is not a myth. It's not something that we're just trying to believe in or we're just trying to make up. That's why I can connect it to so many different things. And I can dive through all these different forms of knowledge where just different pieces were scattered about. And it's for us to take these pieces or these seeds and to actually take them into full budding within ourselves by becoming aware of ourselves. So with that being said, we're going to go into taking our breaths today. I need to do a quick equation really briefly. And this kind of gives us the intuition of what's happening also where there's a barren land. That's how that whole Saturnalian bar thing happens. And in that barren land, which is the Midwest right now, where all of our crops are being produced, it really needs to be, we need to be aware, because this is, you see, it's all cooking itself up. Now, remember, everything that is involved in control is in the know. So this would simultaneously, of course, China and the tariffs that are happening. So in the US, the only other real food source is the same source of where the electronics are coming from. And that's because China became so proficient at producing this clone food to sustain its own population. When you go into a Chinese store here, even in Costa Rica, and you look at the cashews, every single cashew in that bag is exactly the same. This is where the genetics modifications have gone. The whole bag. Because, they pride the whole cashew, right? Everybody said the whole cashew is worth more than the half cashew and the broken cashew. So they produce the whole cashew perfect, a whole bag of perfect cashews, just so you can get an idea of where that genetic modification comes from. It just produces one of the exact identical thing. And they say the danger with that is if that strain becomes infected, all the other strains get wiped out. They all catch it rapidly. So you see that there's a power also in this diversity of how the nature in the soil, how the soil is all types of stuff inside the soil. There's power in that because it gives us a strong palate. And this would make us also rethink getting on these singular diets where we're also just eating one of the same thing. Like, these are the times where we need to have a broader palate with what we can take inside of our body. Maybe go in the other direction, though. Don't necessarily go back to the Doritos that you couldn't eat anymore. I'm going to make sure I can eat these Doritos again from Seven saying. No, what I'm saying is start seeing, like, with these hydrogens and with these, even start with your oxygen. Keep administering it to the body until the body takes it. Same thing with why the algae are so nasty. It's like, oh man, but dolphins eat algae. And when you think about just the idea of when you can't get something else, you start liking what you can get. So I'm sure the dolphins love these certain kind of algae, but they're never going to get a Dorito chip. You see what I mean? So our conditioning, that's why our bodies adapt. That's the most important thing for us all to be aware here. Our bodies adapt. So that means that if your body is only given these certain amount of foods, it'll eventually start liking those foods. But as long as there's still pizza as an option, then the body's going to go for that. And this is the deeper knowledge and the wisdom. So let me just do this calculation.